Good morning. It's 10 o'clock and we had said that we'll start at 10, but we are still waiting for some dignitaries to arrive. So apologies for the delay.
I would first of all like to extend a very warm welcome to our Honorable Minister for sparing time to come to our inaugural session and inaugurate the consultation. This consultation is of great importance for South Asia because of the importance that education has in all our countries. a major problem relating to practically all operational and substantive aspects of imparting education is the security and safety that we provide to the children in going to the school and in the school environment. So this is what we have assembled to discuss here this morning. And I think we have experts on this subject. And so I would just give the floor to Mr. Ambareesh Rai for introducing the subject, and then to Mr. Bhatt Rai for presenting the position in Nepal. Yes.
Friends, I welcome you all to the consultative meet of the South Asia Regional Forum on Safe and Secure Education. Today we have with us Honorable Minister of State, Independent Charge, Housing and Urban Affairs, Sri Hardeep Singh Puri as the chief guest. I welcome you, sir. Professor Muchkund Dubey, mentor of the RTE Forum and President of Council for Social Development. Ms. Stuti Kakkar, Chairperson of National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Mr. Eric Fall, Director on UNESCO, representative to Bhutan, India, Maldives, and Sri Lanka. Mr. Kumar Bhattarai, Chairperson of National Campaign for Education, Nepal, and the Steering Committee member of the South Asia Regional Forum. Ms. Radhika Alkaji, she is the National Council member of RT Forum and also a Steering Committee member. Mr. Aminul Haq, Deputy Director of Program, Swedish Committee of Afghanistan. Ms. Papia Fardosi, Program Manager, BRAC, Education Program, Bangladesh. Mr. Rahmatullah Arman, Gul Makai Champion, Malala Fund, Afghanistan, and other important leaders from different social movements, networks, educationists, and activists. It gives me great pleasure to witness that so many of you have taken the time off your busy schedule to join us today, and this makes me confident that all of us united by the cause of safe and secure education for all. It has also given us the encouragement to keep advocating for the purpose with support from all of you. Right to education is now a fundamental right in India, and RT Act, which came into effect in 2010, mandates that all children between age group of 6 to 14 years will have free and compulsory education. The RT Act was the cornerstone for improving the education scenario in the country. However, 8 years since its inception, we have seen less than 10% school complying with its provisions. There still exists huge vacancy. 5 lakh posts vacant. 5 lakh posts are vacant for the teachers. 9 lakh teachers still untrained. 8% single teacher schools. Lack of clean drinking water in the schools. Poor infrastructure. Issue of timely disbursement of teaching learning materials. Lack of adequate resources are some of the persistent problems that affect the learning environment in schools. Alongside, we have recently seen that a large number of schools in India are being shut down in the name of rationalization. Private entities coming into the education space, leading to mushrooming of low-cost, pro-private private schools. After the enactment of the RT Act, we have achieved an increase in enrollment, but still millions of children who are either out of school or dropping out from the school before completing their elementary education. As a result of these challenges, all children are not able to enjoy their right to free and compulsory education even after 8 years of the enactment of RT Act. Those who are deprived for this right mostly belong to the marginalized groups, children with disability, and especially girls. The RT Act guarantees the protection of rights of children. Needless to say, Every child deserves a safe and secure education for it, safe and secure environment for education. However, the reality gives a different picture. Data reveals that several girls drop out of school due to poor safety conditions within the school environment, lack of separate toilets for girls and boys, distance of travel between their homes and schools. Other factors also play a role, like engagement in domestic chores, taking care of a younger sibling, early marriages, and in general the patriarchal mindset that does not prioritize girls' education. Recently, we have seen several reports from across the country which highlights the plight of girls both within the school as well as out of the school. This shows the lack of effective protective mechanisms. All this is true not just for India, but other South Asian countries as well. Apart from the issues of safety and security, there are other important and common areas like the universalization of school education, adequate resources, equity and inclusion, teachers' issues, increasing commercialization of education, recently developed sustainable development goals which provide us opportunity to work together in South Asia region. Today we will hear similar grassroots level experiences and national voices from the participants from neighboring countries. It is high time that these challenges are addressed, and all of us gathered here today can take a pledge to make this issue a prime agenda in our respective countries as well as at the regional level while working in education, human rights, and women empowerment, etc. The South Asia Regional Forum on Safe and Secure Education was envisioned to form a collective voices on the similar issues, provide an opportunity for cross-learning, and influence policy discourse in South Asian region. The forum was formed after several deliberations with representatives from neighboring countries. In 2017, during the national stock taking of RT Forum, RT Forum, we have launched it. After that, we have launched it in Nepal, and now we are moving towards Bangladesh and Afghanistan. So these are the common issues where we want to work together, and it all depending on the strengthening of the national movements in respective countries. So I once again, I would like to welcome all of you. Sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambrish. I think I shall change the program a little bit, as the minister has to rush and catch a flight. So I would now request him to take the floor and benefit us with his views on the subject, and also elaborate the gathering.
Thank you, sir. Ambrish ji, distinguished members on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of full disclosure, I should start by saying that I used to belong to a profession where I had a little more time to deal with issues which form the subject of your deliberations today. In particular, during a stint I had as a permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva, I had some occasion to focus on these issues, and then later as ambassador to the UN in New York, I had an occasion to work on these issues in a little more rigorous manner. But for the last 9 months, I've been locked up in the urban space where, apart from many other challenges, I face the wrath of trolls who throw unenlightened criticism on a range of issues, and sometimes because I belong to a previous profession, I'm inclined to respond, and that makes it worse. So when Professor Dubey mentioned to me the other day that he wanted, and Ambrish ji wanted me to join you this morning to speak on issues relating to the girl child and the education of the girl child, I must say I was quite happy, and without giving it a second thought, I said straight away yes. But then began the real issue. Since this was only, I think, late last week, I had to immediately get down to putting on my thinking cap and wonder as to what it is that I was going to share with this very deeply committed and thinking audience on this issue. But let me start by saying a few words about my relationship with Professor Dubey. You know, there is something which is known which is in the public domain. He is one of the finest products of the Indian Foreign Service, a most distinguished, erudite, and visionary diplomat from India and South Asia. But he also happens to be an outstanding academic, writer, and thinker. And therefore, I was not surprised when Ambrishji told me when I was coming here. I said, you know, I'm only here because my mentor asked me to be here. So he said, but he's also mentored this thing. So I think Professor Dubey's social activism and leadership in civil society has inspired many of us, and I think that continues to be the story. So before I begin to share my thoughts with you this morning, and this is how I have structured it, let me place before you one self-evident truism, and which is that if you want to address issues of development in any country, no matter what the country, I think the response is education, education, education. Now, not to trivialize, but in the urban space from which where I'm locked up these days, there, if you look at issues, they have their own self-evident truism. You want to buy property, for instance, it's location, location, location. I mean, the other parameters may be a little up and down, but that is the fundamental on which this is anchored. So I think education is the anchor on which any discussion on developing a nation and looking for progress in that area is concerned. Let me share with you some thoughts about how I have had to face the outside world as a member of the Indian Foreign Service. The narrative which we on our side, and especially those of us who are practicing diplomats, like to project, is that India is a remarkable success story, that we are a country which can rightfully boast of a successful post-colonial transformation. According to a Cambridge economist, Angus Maddison, India's output, India's GDP in the year 1700 was something akin to 27% of the global GDP. When we became an independent country, the first census that we have after that, I think is 1950, it had come down to 3%. We are today a $2.8 trillion economy, but 50% of that is in the external sector. It is the value of goods trade, trade in goods, services, and remittances put together. We are clearly, I'm not saying this because I draw strength from that last 7.7% growth rate in the last quarter, but no matter which way you look at it, we are headed towards being a $5 trillion economy by 2030, the year in which we complete the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, that narrative is a narrative I have often used, but I have also tried to put in reality checks and mention another narrative, and I think one would be failing if one didn't, because that narrative is complementary. Yes, we are a successful story of post-colonial reconstruction, but we also have more poor people in India than poor in all the least developed countries of the world put together. So there is a massive developmental challenge. And I believe, and this brings me to the first point I wish to submit to you, I believe this basic and imperative of dealing with this challenge is the education system and the education of the girl child. Now, the importance of educating a girl child has multiple benefits. To begin with, for the child herself, and most evidently for the larger socio-economic framework of a country. Education empowers the girl to realize the essence of gender equality and her own empowerment through her life cycle. This empowerment has cascading benefits which include physical and mental development and fostering of abilities into a self-confident woman. From a social perspective, the education of a girl child is a prerequisite to end evils such as child marriage, child maternity, and dowry. These social evils are fatal for a woman's health and well-being and her development. In fact, the education of the girl child brings benefits to families and communities as a whole. As enlightened daughters, sisters, and mothers, they become role models for other women and are key to changing orthodox mindsets that hold communities and societies back. Girls' education, along with lifelong education for women, has the greatest intergenerational impact. Without the active participation of half the population in the economy, and women comprise half the population. In fact, I remember in the run-up to the 2014 elections when I had some inputs to provide, it was my constant effort, look, don't make a mistake. There are gender empowerment issues which are central because these are also politically very important issues. Without the active participation, as I said, of half the population in the economy, no country, including India, will be able to develop in an inclusive and sustainable manner. Estimates suggest the economic empowerment of women has a force multiplier effect on the GDP of a country, raising women's participation in the labor force to the same level as men can boast India's GDP by a whopping 27%. And critical to women and girls joining the labor force is, again, education. Inequity in the economy can in turn adversely impact the nation's overall growth story and create disruptions in its social fabric. Put another way, it is only when the most marginalized woman is educated will India truly achieve inclusive and sustainable development along with a peaceful and social environment. Educated girls and young women are key to realization of the SDGs in their entirety. But before I come to SDG 5, I also wanted to digress for a minute. I had the privilege of watching this process at close quarters, and I used to always maintain that the previous set of development goals, the Millennium Development Goals, the thinking and conceptual design for those goals was done in the think tank of the West, the OECD. And that package of MDGs came to us literally on an as-is, where-is basis, take it or leave it. And many of us saw the conceptual flaws there, but clearly we could not turn our backs on development or development goals, and we embraced them. But let's make no mistake, the MDGs package succeeded essentially because China was able to lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. With a little help from India, we did also quite well on the MDGs. But I'm mentioning this by way of background only to stress the fact that the Sustainable Development Goals or the 2030 Agenda will succeed if India succeeds. And India's success will mean the success of the SDGs. So it is essential for the SDG implementation. And the good news here is, and I have done a fair amount of work in the few months that I was allowed to be in the RIS, where we looked at each of these SDGs and in the context of the run-up to the last high-level political forum in New York, we saw that each one of these SDG goals actually had been put into our own program, and that the SDGs themselves helped us focus more sharply on them. Coming back to Goal 5, while SDG 5 is specific to gender equality in empowering all women and girls, all the other goals have elements of gender equality that need to be addressed. As Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs, I am acutely conscious of the fact that SDG 11, which focuses on making cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, is also intrinsically tied to gender empowerment. The World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Report 2017 found that the 144 countries covered in the study were able to bridge the gender education gap by 95%, a slight decrease compared to the previous year. India, on its part, has been making significant strides to reduce the gap at home. Today, girls in India are almost as likely as boys to attend secondary and senior secondary schools and colleges. Despite this progress, what worries me most are the dropout rates for girls who enroll into schools and colleges. And I think, Amrishji, your opening remarks also pointed in that direction. The annual average dropout rates for girls at the secondary level today stands at 16.88%. This number is too high for a society that continues to be plagued by the ills of orthodoxy. And for an economy that has more poor people than all of sub-Saharan Africa. A study conducted by the Annual Survey of Education Report, ASER, in 2017 found that the predominant reason for dropouts is family constraints. It is clear that patriarchal social structures increasingly find educated women threatening their dominance over culture and customs. This is a major impediment to the India story. For India to be a shining example of a post-colonial democratic international order, one with an economic model predicated on sustainability, it can ill afford to disfranchise half its population based on rationale which are non-compliant with its 21st century ambitions. I'd like to say a few words about the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaign. This is to attack this mindset and its disastrous impact on the human rights of girls and to uphold our civilizational values of equal dignity and valuing and even deifying girls and women that the Prime Minister, Shri Modi, launched this Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaign. He rightly and inextricably linked the saving of the girl child to educating the girl child. He has done so to begin a virtuous cycle of valuing girls and women and investing in them. The objective is to create and add value through her education for her family, for her community, and for her country. The Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaign is aimed at creating a Jan Andolan or a mass social movement to awaken the conscience of the country to this most pressing concern. Moreover, the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaign seeks to create an ecosystem necessary in a developing country like India, where poverty and ignorance can thwart the best intentions of peoples and government. What really adds to the effectiveness of the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao movement is the fact its ethos have been dovetailed into all of the Prime Minister's flagship missions. Skill India, Startup India, Jan Dhan Yojana are all at their core instruments to empower the women and girls of India. 3 of the Prime Minister's flagship missions are anchored in my ministry. Actually more, but the 3 that are relevant to our discussion today. I am proud to state that their transformative impact on the lives of women or girls is already evident. Let me start with the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, or Affordable Housing for All mission. This seeks to provide affordable housing to all Indian citizens. Mandates that beneficiaries of the scheme register the house either in the name of the lady of the house or ensure co-ownership. This ensures not just societal security of the lady, but also her economic well-being. Let me give you a little background to the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. We had done a study sometime in 2011 to identify the gap which would exist between housing available and that amount that needs to be constructed to ensure that every Indian would have a home which he or she could call their own by the year 2022. And that study threw up a number of 18 million. We thought that this figure may not be entirely right. It may be too little or too high. So we subjected this to validation at the level of the states and the union territories. And we finally arrived at a figure of 11 million. And This 11 million has to be constructed, since the scheme started in 2015 by 2022. Now, the good news here is that for the urban sector, by the end of this month, June, we would have already sanctioned 5.1 million homes. And we are sanctioning homes at the rate of 300,000 to 500,000 every month. In other words, a scheme which is due for completion by 2022 would already have been exhausted in terms of sanctions by 2019 middle. This is for the urban sector. So when my colleague in the cabinet, Shri Narendra Singh Tomar, and I talk, he tells me that by December 2018, he would have sanctioned 1 crore houses. That's 10 million. Not sanctioned, delivered for the rural part. To which my answer is, by December 2018, I hope to have sanctioned 1 crore houses, which is 10 million. And, you know, the urban housing, there's a little bit of a tagline. Now, all these homes, the title has to be in the name of the lady of the house. Now, that is the point I'm making here. It's not the education, but you also give them rights. Because in the event of a marital disagreement or whatever, normally what happens in traditional societies is that the male, because of the patriarchal system, dominates, and if the lady is shown the way out, here it would be the other way around, because you have title, and title in law provides additional benefit. Now I want to add that this, under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, every house has to have a functioning toilet. It must have, which also has introduced behavioral change. Now, the building of toilets, which is another thing as part of the Swachhta campaign, which I have to do, I think at the very least, this has afforded dignity to the girl child. Otherwise, you know, to have to go and... Now, to give you a background little on the Swachhta campaign, you know, Mahatma Gandhi, speaking at the Banaras Hindu College in 1916, a year before he started the Champaran and the civil disobedience movement, he said, I went around the temples looking for God, and I couldn't find him. He was referring to Swachhta, or the lack of it. And basically, he said then, and that is the inspiration, that Swachhta is even more important than political freedom. Now, I know that when the Prime Minister raised this issue from the ramparts of the Red Fort on 15th August 2014, many of my liberal left-of-center friends were sniggering a little and saying, is this an issue which the Prime Minister should have raised? And I can tell you, I was one of those who said, absolutely. And, you know, I had a young officer working with me in the Defense Ministry when I was on deputation, and he joined the Swachhta campaign very early under this outstanding officer, Parameshwar Iyer. And when I used to come from New York and I used to ask him, Akshay, how's it going? He said, going brilliantly, sir. We've lifted 100 million people. So I used to ask him, how many more to go? And he, last time, before I realized that I was going to be inducted into this campaign, he said, sir, 320 million more to go. So I said, you must be serious. You know, I hope you realize what you're saying. That's the population of the United States, and I added a few more countries to bring it to the figure of 320. I said, that's the number of people who go and defecate out in the open. But that's the reality. That is the reality. Well, the Prime Minister realized what he was dealing with, so he said, he did something totally brilliant. He said, it's not a question of building toilets. We will build the toilets. In the urban area, I have to build 67 lakh toilets. I've already done 52, 53. The target is 2019 October. I'll do it by October. But he said, India will have to be open defecation free. The minute you say India has to be ODF, it means you're looking for a behavioral change. And that behavioral change is not self-certification. It is third-party certification and a constant review. So I think that this emphasis on Swachhta, this emphasis on ODF, and the idea is that before the Mahatma's 150th birth anniversary, which is 2019 or 2nd October, India will be ODL. In all these flagship schemes, which deal with education, which deal with you know, women's rights, and a host of things, the Prime Minister has often claimed that he, like millions of others, did not need a textbook to study and understand poverty. the indignity a woman faces when she has to relieve herself in the open, the health hazards she puts herself through every day, the sheer physical threat to her life she experiences every time she has to answer the call of nature, are life experiences he and many Indians like him have seen and witnessed firsthand. The Swachh Bharat mission, therefore, is not simply an infrastructure project. It is a commitment to all Indian women and girls that they deserve to lead a life of dignity, safety, and hygiene. Because I have a shortage of time, let me just mention to you that all the other schemes equally are targeted in that manner. For instance, the damage caused to the health of our girls and women when they had to do the cooking in the traditional mode. So for the decision to provide every household in India a free gas connection or electricity, free electricity connection, not free electricity. Often there is a mistake made on that. A few days ago, I accompanied the Prime Minister for the inauguration of the 10th Integrated Command and Control System of the Naya Raipur Smart City. This is the 10th. There are 9 already which had been inaugurated earlier. And one of the points which struck me there in the context of our discussion today is that crime rates have reduced by 18 to 20% in the smart cities as a result of the technological use. And in Surat in particular, it has come down to by 20%. These centers are the nervous systems of a smart city. They collect and analyze data in real time, and the GPS sensors and cameras will relay the exact location and activities taking place, for instance, in a bus. No longer will women and girls feel unsafe to utilize public spaces, etc. I just want to spend a minute or two on the ecosystem necessary for girls, for the education of the girl child, and then conclude with a personal issue which I think sums up our discussion this morning. First, access, availability, and affordability of educational facilities for the girl child at all levels, primary, secondary, tertiary, and vocational, and science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM. Second, quality of these facilities, teachers, curricula, and infrastructure must be developed through the lens of gender empowerment. I heard, and I know this to be a fact, that when you look at the state of teaching in our schools, the number of vacancies. Also, I'm afraid I was the chairman of a governing body of a Delhi University college, and I was appalled by what I saw there. I was also very worried about some of the manner in which teachers were being recruited. But those, I have my speaking notes, which if anybody is interested, I can leave those for you to have a look at. In other words, if you look at women's issues, it's not a question of the development being women-friendly. It has to be women-led. And I think that is the point which civil society should reinforce when it comes to its interactions with the government. The state government and local government must commit and act. An issue as grave as the future of our girls cannot be held hostage to politicking. I think that needs to be the message from civil society, because very often we tend to utilize each of these issues in order to position ourselves. But I think on basic development issues, education and the girl child, there is no politics. There is only one, good politics is good governance in this. Various arms of the government cannot alone realize the ambitions of Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaign. The private sector, civil society, and academia will have an equal stake in helping India mainstream gender in the social, economic, and political spheres. And this is where I believe civil society and groups like yourselves, sir, are playing a very important role, and they should continue to reinforce this effort. Success in what I call the project of saving and empowering the girl child through comprehensive education is not only essential, but achievable, and opens up the huge potential of our peoples and our countries. I now want to conclude, since I see on Vijay Pratap's watch that I might miss my flight. Thodi aage. I want to end with a personal story. Exactly 100 years ago, that is in 1918, a young girl called Malati witnessed her mother die from repeated childbirth. She was rescued by her father from a similar fate. And instead of her being confined to a life of child marriage and child maternity, she, along with her sister, was sent to the Ahilya Ashram, an orphanage and boarding school for girls in Indore. These two girls, Malati and her sister, went on, not only cleared school, graduated from high school, but got enrolled in Elphinstone College, Mumbai. After attaining undergraduate degrees, they went on to become pioneers in women's higher education in Maharashtra. Why do I know this story? Because this young girl, Malati, became my mother-in-law later. And I had heard this story. I went to Indore and I located the ashram or the orphanage. It's still a very good school run by the state. And lo and behold, I was able to find, they were able to find for me the register of 1918 where this young girl has signed her name, Malati Bai Desai. Now the story becomes interesting because her father was able to give his daughter, her education. I think it passed on from there to my wife and from her to our children. Now, I believe this has been a mainstream trend that we have realized, but we have submitted ourselves or succumbed to short-term social practices in an orthodox society. But no matter which way you look at it, at the end of the day, of course, there's another very interesting story because she was a Maratha and fell in love with my father-in-law who was a Brahmin. Both of them were thrown out of their community and they had to go and settle in New Delhi. And but that has been a part of our society. So I want to conclude, sir, once again by thanking you for giving me this opportunity. It has given me much needed respite from the trolls that I encounter on social media. But I also want to say that I take even that urban space as part of a challenge. But thank you very much. I wish your deliberations very well. I'm sorry, I would have liked to stay and listen to all the experts. Bhattaraji, I know you were scheduled to speak second, but I had to wood my way through, and Radhika ji and Suti ji. But I'm sure Vijay Pratap can give me the gist of these deliberations next time that he meets me to quarrel with me on certain political issues, which I will keep out of this discussion. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I would have thank you.
So we shall continue our deliberations, and I get back to the program. And now I have the privilege of requesting Mr. Kumar Bhattrai to enlighten us on the problems that he faced in his country on this issue.
Thank you very much. Respected Professor Dubey, distinguished guests, distinguished participants. ENC Nepal is very proud to be the part of this movement. In South Asia, we are facing the same common kind of problems regarding safety and security, safe and secure education. As Ambarish ji presented, so this is the situation everywhere in South Asia. So with this note, I begin my presentation. It is on journey and achievements, what we have been doing so far in this movement when we joined in this forum. Nepal now, we have, politically, we have a lot of changes. Three tier of governments that are in place. It is the local governments, it is with implementing entity, it is very much power with, and we have got provincial government as well as the federal government. So we are very much focusing on the local governments because they are the implementing body of the governments. So whatever the policies and plans are made, they are being implemented from the local government side. So in education part also, basic education up to the secondary education, it is the responsibility, duty of the local governments. So in this time, in recent time, we are very much focusing on the local governments in respect to the implementation of safe and secure education in the school level. Talking about ENC Nepal, it is one of the largest civil society movements in Nepal to guarantee quality education in an equitable basis. It focuses on the evidence-based advocacy, awareness raising, capacity development, and research works. And we have 339 members from different work of different international, national NGOs, federations, education media organizations, teachers community, as well as the grassroots organizations. So this is one of the largest civil society movements for the quality education in Nepal, and we have been in 39 districts. Our district chapters are in 39 districts. So let me talk about key highlights regarding the initiations for marginalized girls' safe and secure education, what we have been doing for last 2 years' time. However, we have been, this safe and secure education is the part of campaign for us from the very beginning, from its establishment. But after joining this forum, safe and secure education for the girl child has become one of the major agendas for us. So what we have been doing so far, a few of the points that I'm raising it up. We have accomplished the national stock taking program. It was a very successful program. We brought number of people from different spheres of life together, and we discussed about safe and secure education. So situation of the country and our role to address the problem. And we have been, as I told earlier also, influencing the local governments to prepare the safe and secure educational policies via local level policy dialogue and consultations, public hearing programs that are the strategies and activities that we have been performing for the local level governments. And the CSOs appeal highlighting the need of safe and secure education submitted to the local governments and obtain their commitment to ensure safe education at their local units. So local units are very, very important. And whatever the appeals or whatever programs that we make, we are very much focused on safe and secure education for girls. this is some of the evidences that we have generated, how the girl child empowered and talked with the mayors. Awareness to the local government, security agencies, CSOs, SMC, PTA, adolescent girls, parents, teachers, etc., regarding the national level policies for the safe and secure education. Lobby with the major political parties leaders, that has also been going on. So a few of the political parties' name has been given over here. We are very much closely, that is with lobby with the political parties. And these are some of the media partnerships for highlighting and communicating the issue to the grassroots people as well as the policy makers. These are some of the glimpses of the print medias, how they have been carrying on the issues of safe and secure education for girls. Sensitization and awareness raising, sensitization to the member organizations. NC Nepal has been trying to sensitize the member organizations regarding the issue and all 8 domains of the safety and security, basically to NC Nepal District Coordination Committee. These are some of the districts that we have been mentioning. And sensitization to the deputy mayors and Dalit women representatives to the various local units regarding the major issue and 8 domains of safety and security. So deputy mayors of the municipalities are responsible for these issues, social issues. That is why we are very much focusing on the deputy mayors. And mostly the deputy mayors are the women. And research work also, status report of the safe and secure education of the adolescent girls in the Rupandi and Kapilvastu district. Research work is in progress and finalization. That is also for, this research is for evidence generation, that we take this evidence for the policy advocacy in the federal level as well as in other areas, provincial and the local level also. And lobbying and networking that we have been doing, lobby with the parliamentarians. It is going on in Nepal after the formulation of the governments and implementation of the new constitutions. There is a lot of laws and policies are to be formulated. So parliamentarians' role are very, very important. That is why we are very much focused on the parliamentarians, meeting them, lobbying them, and making them understand the safe and secure education. So this kind of initiatives also are going on, and our dialogue with dialogues and discourses with the regional agencies such as SAIVAC, UNICEF, ROSA, SARC, ASWE. So these regional networks also we are focusing on, discussing on. There are dialogues and discourses regarding safe and secure education. And networking with the like-minded organizations like NGOs, INGOs working for safety and security related issues, that is also going on. So thank you very much. So these are the activities that we have been doing. But to do these all activities, it doesn't mean that we do not have challenges. There are a lot of challenges that we have been facing. So number one challenge that I mention here is the government policies. They are not very much friendly to the civil societies these days. Government have become, it is very positive and very good news for us that government, stable government we have got after many, many years. That is good. But they are not seem to be the civil society friendly. And recently they have brought national integrity policy kind of thing, as well as the circulars from the Home Affairs. And they are the motive of these 2 policies and circular are to control the civil society initiatives. So that are the challenges that we need to think. That is in addition to the social and other challenges that Amberesji was mentioning about safe and secure education, but as a whole, the civil society movement, we have this kind of challenges that we need to face being together. Thank you very much.
I'll tell you.
Good morning, Professor Dubey, Stuti ji, Mr. Eric Falt, Kumar ji, Amrish ji, and everybody here. It is my privilege to just give you a very quick update on the work of the forum, of the regional forum. And as you know that the regional forum for safe and secure education, the secretariat of that forum is in New Delhi, and the secretariat of the RTE forum, and Amrish ji, headed by Amrish ji, is the secretariat for this forum also. So I'll give you quickly a quick snapshots on some of the actions and the achievements of the forum that have happened in the last 1.5 years. 2017 when they started. Annual stock taking events that the RTE forum does every year, and brings out a report. The report and the stock taking events, and particularly the last year's event, this points out importance of safety and security. Also points out during the stock taking events, which are attended by over 20 states, and where many people from different walks of life come, academicians, people who are activists, involved in education, come together to talk about the status of education in our country. And there is a report that is brought out. And as of every year, we do realize that the RTE compliance is still less than 10% nationally in our country. So RTE, the RTE Act, which was 2009 and implemented in 2010, still 7 years later, 8 years later, we are still not totally compliant. Highlighting not only some of the good practices that happen, but also the gravity of the situation. So that's one of the major actions that has happened. Safety and security, as you know, are very big issues in our country and globally today in our so that has been a big issue that has been taken up in the stock taking. Then we have the school management committee stock taking conventions that also happen. As you know that the RTE Act has developed the school management committees. School management committees are very powerful bodies that have representatives from local governments, parents, school principals, and they are really the bodies that are supposed to make the plan for the school and how the school should run, monitor what happens to children, their enrollment and retention, safety and security. So these are very major bodies, and the forum in the last 2 years has been regularly having stock-taking conventions where school management committees and members come from over 19 states and discuss some of the issues. I remember in the last convention, there was a very clear understanding amongst the school management committees on who is marginalized in our country. And many sets of children were talked about, and including children with disabilities. So the school management committees come together, not only talk about who is marginalized, what we can do, but also what are the issues. Meeting with the parliamentarians, this is another very major activity of the forum. And in the last few meetings, there have been a lot of focus on the budgets, because as you know, budgets in education have been slashed quite a bit. And also the RTE Act itself is facing a lot of barriers with certain policies and the parts of the act being rolled back, such as the no detention policy, the CCE. So, and these situations, such as a possible rolling back on the no detention policy, on CCE, can affect children and their safety and security hugely, and therefore The forum has taken up many of these issues with the parliamentarians, working also with the teachers' unions. A two-day meeting was held with teachers' unions, and action plans have been developed on safety and security of girls for 8 states. As you also are probably aware, the RTE Forum is in 20 states, and there are state bodies, the state forums are also there, and therefore this is a point where the state forums as well as the teachers' unions and the plans that are developed by the teachers' unions can come together and work together. So there are locus points in the states also. Awareness through the media is another major activity that has been undertaken. Building a group of journalists and media people. As you know, today we are always talking about what is good news and what is bad news and what is fake news. And very often the conversations on education and issues of development seem to have got lost. So it's very important to develop people and to create an awareness amongst the media, the print and the audiovisual media, to really bring back some of these issues. So there has been an attempt to do that. Groups of journalists are now coming together and looking, for example, on what exactly the Beti Bachao and Beti Padhao scheme, for example, what is its ground level impact? Another major issue is the low GPI of girls with disabilities in education. For example, if you look at data of 10 years, you will see that girls with disabilities in their enrollment is far less than girls and of course boys with disabilities. And this, these are statistics that go on for years and years and years. So media can throw out some light on these issues and also take up a series on safety and security of children in schools. The other recent developments, and probably Stuti ji will also talk about them, the CBSE, in taking cognizance of the issues of safety and security. As you know, that many issues have come up in our country in the last quite a few years. In schools they have come up, and also in the fact that very often we have found violence against children, particularly the girl child, and particularly very young girl children. That has come up as a major concern in our country. Schools are not spared from what happens in a society, and therefore the CBSE has reviewed its safety and security guidelines. And one of the major things there is that rather than making the child responsible, the school is actually responsible for the safety and security of the student in the school. The NCPCR, the National Commission for the Protection of Child Rights, they have brought out a manual on safety and security of children in schools. And in the plans of the various states also, these issues are now being taken up. The forum has one of the major activities, as you know, the RTE Act and our fundamental right for education for children is from 6 to 14 years of age. And the forum, along with the ECC, Alliance for ECCD, and many others, have been looking at the downward and the upward extension of the legal right. And that has been a very major part of the work, because if we do not include the very young child, and that child is left out of the right to education, then it becomes a real difficulty, because many children just don't get to that stage. Now today we have a new scheme in our country which is kind of in a way combining together. It's called the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, where the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and the secondary, the secondary, the scheme for secondary education have been put together, and a new scheme has been floated in our country. But the question that the forum is asking today is whether a scheme is enough and whether we really need the legal right, and the work for the legal right is what is happening. Then the budgets, advocating to spend and to have a higher level of budgets for education in our country. As you know, this is a very long-standing demand of civil society. And the RTE forum, Amrish ji is often invited by the finance ministry for budget consultations. Not that, not a great deal of change has happened, but this is some of the work that has been happening. The state forums in 20 states carry on a very major work, and some of them have been focusing a lot on the issues of safety and security. Overall, looking at the low standards of quality in schools, better planning, enhanced budgets. Many state forums have been focusing on the girl child and marginalized children, children with disabilities, Dalits, Adivasi groups, and others. Also, in many states, there have been emergencies, so focusing on education in those particular situations. We have some examples here of Tamil Nadu working for education of child laborers, out-of-school children, looking very carefully at the increase of unregulated private schools. These are, of course, issues that are important for the whole country, but specific work also happens in the states. Bihar looking at child marriages, discrimination against Dalit children. Gujarat looking at poor infrastructure, teacher shortages, and many other issues, for example, textbooks where certain communities may be misrepresented. These are some of the state focus areas. UP, looking at schools affected by chronic flooding during monsoons. Post-earthquake recovery in Uttarakhand and in Chhattisgarh, looking at the Red Corridor areas, and particularly these are issues that affect the right to education and the safety and security of the child in education. So basically, just a quick recap of the work that's happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now request Mr. Eric Falt to take the floor. He is the new director of UNESCO for India and some of the neighboring countries. So we really look forward to hearing.
Thank you, Professor Dubé. Distinguished members of the panel and Mr. Rai. May Bahet Prasan hu aj shap sablogon ke biches mahat vapurn avsarpur. I would like to thank you and especially, of course, the South Asia Regional Forum on Safe and Secure Education for inviting me today. And of course, I will try to contribute to the discussions on the emerging challenges and solutions for safe and secure education in South Asian countries. The Honorable Minister has made a very inspiring intervention. I'm sure we will all agree on this earlier on. And I'm very glad that he put so much emphasis on the importance of girl and women education. That's clearly the key to the future of any country and certainly of the region. And the first point to sort of move on from what he's already said that I want to make today is that many of the ambitious targets set by the global community through the Sustainable Development Goals to provide safe and supportive learning environments will simply not be achieved until, in particular, school-related violence is eliminated. And I think this is something that others have already touched upon or will touch upon. And I will also emphasize today that we must find ways in particular to end violence against girls in our schools, and that gender-based violence is a global scourge we must better tackle. Ladies and gentlemen, according to UN data, every year 246 million girls and boys around the world are subject to some form of school-related violence. And this can take many forms. It can include mistreatment, bullying, more and more unfortunately cyberbullying, psychological abuse, and sexual harassment. And I'm sure that many of you in this room know about examples of this violence and these different types of violence, perhaps even in your own families. And the unsafe learning environments that have been created as a result of this violence reduce the quality of education for all learners. Indeed, the affected learners who are affected by this violence may, for instance, avoid or participate less in class. Sometimes they may even drop out of school altogether. They are in any case at risk of increased anxiety, psychological stress and depression. Violence, which, as I said, can include bullying, can in fact occur anywhere in the school environment. It can occur in the classrooms. It can occur in the playgrounds, in toilets, in changing rooms, on the way to or from schools, and of course, as I said, online. We will actually, by the way, have on the 28th of June at the UNESCO House an event that we organize with some of our other partners on child safety online, and those of you who are interested are welcome to join. So this violence also, it must be pointed out, can be carried out by students, but yes, also by educational and non-educational staff. And we have to recognize finally that it will affect first and foremost the victims, but also bystanders, and in a way, yes, the perpetrators themselves. Violence in schools can take many forms, and both girls and boys can be targets. We know that typically the girls are more exposed to sexual violence, while boys are most often subject to corporal punishment and gang violence. But there is a widespread understanding, again, around the world, not just in the region, that we must redouble our efforts when it comes to gender-based violence and break what is often akin to a conspiracy of silence in many countries around the world. Despite the increasing attention given to safety and security in education, I also would like to mention that the research concerning gender-based violence in schools in the Asia-Pacific region is very uneven, with, in fact, very few systematic and comprehensive studies to understand the magnitude of this scourge. UNESCO's most recent report on the subject, which itself dates back to 2014, concludes that the evidence, as far as the region is concerned, is actually very scattered and difficult to compare across countries because it's not, as I said, comprehensive enough. Several countries in Asia lack a comprehensive and legislative framework that addresses violence in and around schools, or at least a focused programmatic response. Rather, it appears that most countries in the Asia-Pacific undertake legislative strategies and frameworks that address each form of violence probably too much in isolation. For example, in many cases, corporal punishment is addressed, but not student-on-student violence. Similarly, bullying may be addressed, but not bullying based on perceived sexual orientation or gender identity and expression. Sexual violence perpetrated by adults may be addressed, but not necessarily sexual violence by other students. And unless deeply entrenched cultures that tolerate and perpetuate forms of school violence are addressed, I would say, holistically, UNESCO believes that policies and programs will be ineffective. Moreover, the lack of intersectoral collaboration and coordination in efforts to address school violence, as well as disjointed national actions on policy and programming, clearly need further attention, again, all over the world, but specifically here in this case in the Asia-Pacific region too. The global community is reacting, and member states hold stimulating debates, are trying to take action, especially in intergovernmental organizations such as ours, and ensuring that all children and young people have access to safe, inclusive, and healthy learning environments has become a priority. It is certainly a strategic priority for us at UNESCO. A couple of years ago, UNESCO's executive board adopted a historic resolution called Learning Without Fear, which recognizes that violence against children, and I'm quoting from this resolution, have a devastating effect on the dignity of children and on the enjoyment of human rights, and constitute a major obstacle to the equal enjoyment of the right to education for all, gender equality at all levels of education, and inclusive, transformational, and sustainable development. This resolution is the basis for action of all countries who have agreed that this was an important issue, and calls specifically on governments to design and implement national policies and actions. And again, there is a lot of action that is taking place. What I'm saying is simply that we need more. When it comes to the global guidance to end gender-based violence in education, which was another landmark report jointly published by UNESCO and UN Women in 2016, it is also a key document that I want to mention here today because it provides key information to governments, but also policymakers, teachers, practitioners, and civil society organizations who wish to take concrete action against school-related gender-based violence. This is a document that offers approaches, methodologies, and tools to prevent and respond to such violence. We have at UNESCO a team who can help you and guide you if you're interested in these documents. My colleague Satoko Yeno is here with me today. She's our top specialist in this field. And I want to finish by, since we are looking at the situation in the region, but we're here in India, I really want to give solid credit to the government and to the Ministry of Human Resource Development, of course, in particular, which have shown a high level of commitment to developing a comprehensive, evidence-informed policy for ensuring a safe and secure learning environment in schools. Everybody has a contribution to make, and I'm always especially happy to discuss this issue with civil society organizations because no one group has the answer to these issues. Quite clearly, we all have to pitch in, intergovernmental organizations like ours, government authorities, civil society, school, and educationists. I know that in India, a national core group was recently established to look into the issues related to, in particular, girls' education, which also includes school safety as an essential component. I know that there have been a number of circulars sent from the Ministry and Central Board of Secondary Education to the state education departments to promote the creation of safe, non-violent, and inclusive learning environments for all boys and girls. So this is all part of this general effort that we have to put together, and it obviously goes in the right direction. For our part, we stand modestly ready to advise and support whenever needed. These efforts are long-term efforts. We look forward to engaging with all of the ministries in charge of education and, of course, with civil society to ensure that no child or young person is denied the fundamental right to education. Dhanyavad.
Thank you. Now, then, Stuti Keka. Chairman of the National Committee for the Protection of the Rights of the Child.
I really should lose weight before I knock over everything. Professor Dubey, Mr. Eric Falt, Kumar Bhattaraiji, my old friend Radha Alkazi, and my other friends in the audience. Sabse pehle, I would like to congratulate Amrish ji for who has started this dialogue, and his team and the organizers, because I always feel that countries should come together, because especially South Asia, Southeast Asian countries should come together, discuss these problems pertaining to children. We share commonalities of culture, attitudes, and I think we'll be able to find solutions together. As you all know, most of you, that I was working basically in disabilities, but after coming to this sector, for the last 3 years, one has been, as the minister said, he was caught in the urban space, I was caught in the child rights space. And I find that our children are facing a lot of violence. I don't know why we are not nurturing our children. Children are a gift of God. They're given to us in trust. We don't own them. And yet, even parents are totally misbehaving with their children, not looking after them. They are suffering violence both in the public space and in the personal space, within their homes and outside homes. Outside homes, chalo, the child doesn't belong to a person, so they feel that they can do whatever they want with the child. But why inside homes? And the effects of childhood violence don't leave the individual. I think they follow him to the grave. Today we are getting so many adult survivors of child sexual abuse. They are women my age, they are men my age, and yet they have not forgotten the horrible experience of child sexual abuse and other violences they may have suffered at the hands of their loved ones, near and dear ones. So that shows how deep-rooted the effects of childhood violence are. And therefore, I am very happy that we have started this dialogue. And it should extend not only to the school system. Schools are easy. ठीक है, RT Act are there, but they are institutions also. And they are also, that is where we can go and maybe engender the change that is needed for making the society safer for our children. As you all know, NCPCR is the apex body for monitoring child rights, violation to child rights, and we are also mandated to monitor RT Act. And we did a lot of data collection, I would say. Data mining is yet to come. But collecting the data was also a huge task. There are 14 lakh schools, out of which private schools are quite a number, about more than almost 4 lakhs private schools. And there are about 85 lakh teachers in schools, out of which about 36 lakh teachers are in private schools. I'm giving this lay of the land because not only are we dealing with government schools, which have the weight of the government, it is much easier talking to the government schools, ensuring that the message of safety, POXO Act, JJ Act goes down right to the grassroots level. But in private schools, what are we finding? We are finding that most states are very scared of talking to the private schools. That incident that happened in Ryan School, where that adult, I would say older child, was caught for apprehended for killing the younger child, that horrible incident that happened. Now, had my member not gone there, had he not rushed to Ryan School, this FIR would have never been lodged against the management, who are running these enterprises and with impunity are flouting all rules. Nobody seems to be sort of in charge. Every time I go, I ask some the state government officials, by DEO hai, district excise education officer hai, who is in charge? CBSE is in charge. Who is in charge? Everybody seems to sort of look the other way. I said, but then lodge an FIR, JJ Act is there, because if a management is running an enterprise, which is a school, after all, if there was a fire in a factory, you would haul up the top boss there. Lodge an FIR, let us see. And after that, only private schools have started becoming conscious of something like the POXO Act. We are getting requests, please come and give us a talk on POXO Act. We want to understand it more. This act was there from 2012. But it took that incident to bring this message home, that it's not only you can, in a private school, teachers are teaching, they are at the mercy of the management, and some of them had not even heard of POXO Act or other things. It's very easy to catch an employee. You have to send the message home. Everybody has to learn to understand that children need to be safe, and children are changing also. In my childhood, I don't recall of any child knifing another child. But today we have the Tryon School, we have the Vadodara School, and with all the kind of inappropriate, I would really think it is that those images of violence that goes on, the violent games that children play today, the kind of toy gun machines they have in hand, and the kind of stuff they see on internet, it is certainly influencing the minds of children. And this kind of juvenile violence will, I hope it doesn't, but it may just increase. And therefore, we have to look into what is happening outside the schools also. Now, with teachers and all, we are also from the commission trying to sensitize the teachers, including private school teachers, about just the elements of the bare act of POXO, what it entails, what is mandatory reporting, how should you go about it. But then I get this feeling that they are also ill-equipped to change with the environment that is changing. I mean, the technology that we have today is changing the environment from a very traditional kind of environment. The whole milieu has changed. The minds are changing. And parents don't think twice before giving smartphones in the hands of children, you know. And there's no monitoring. They think it's something that a gadget, a gizmo, is what should be given to a child without realizing what that gadget and gizmo is doing to the mind of the child. So therefore, we have to look at it in a very holistic manner. We also need to look, apart from the management, the other people who are involved in running of the school, the staff are pertinent to it. The problem of dropout of school girls, of girls especially, and even I would say is more because of the problems of reaching to the school. When I was working in disabilities, one of my blind friends, visually impaired friends, said, "Madam, you talk about joining work." Yes, I can, but how do I get to work? The kind of molestation we face, the kind of problems we face, where is the transportation, safe transportation for women? How do we get to that work? So it's often this, the lack of safety outside the school environment. Now again, it is society. Why should, even if you have to, as a child, go out, a lot of girls we found were being raped when they go out to defecate, and they have to be safe toilets for them, but certainly they will be somewhere away from the house. I mean, we are getting cases of a parent taking a small child to a relative's house, and while the parent and the child are sleeping, the relative rapes the child. I mean, what is happening? I mean, this safety concept, we have to really get into it, and all of us need to work about it. The Commission Care on its way has, as Radhika mentioned, has crunched together this manual because there were so many guidelines in the system. So my member said, I said, first thing first, bring everything on this on the table so that there is no confusion. People don't have to say, "Acha, this was written in this manual, this was written in this manual," and therefore I said, bring everything together, because safety security, as the minister said, urban development में है तो location है, इसमें है तो social development में है तो education है, तो हर का एक angle अलग रहता है. Now then we have looked into this issue, because this was something which safety security of children is something which I would say has been the kind of space I have been locked into, because as I felt, if a child cannot be secure, if a child cannot have a happy childhood, what kind of individuals are we incubating today? That they are a game for everybody, within the family and outside the family. So therefore, this has been something that we have worked upon, the elements of JJ Act, sensitize the police officers, create child-friendly environment, how to deal with children, come to the parents, how to deal with children, how to bring up your children, sensitize the teachers, at least they should know how to deal with children who have these tendencies, or if a case happens in a school, how to deal with it, what is the law, what does it say. So a lot of our time has been spent in generating a lot of information, to demystify information and to make it simple for the person using it. Now, one big gap that I won't take much of your time, because a lot you'll be discussing this issue exhaustively, that we did was when we discovered that there were these suicides in Kota. Kota, as you know, is the coaching hub. There are 2-3 other hubs, one in Chandigarh, one somewhere else, where children, ambitious parents are pushing children into engineering and things, and sending very young children, 16-year adolescents, just when they need their parents around, to live in these hostels. There were no guidelines for that also, and everybody said it's a hostel, it is out of JJ, it is out of this, it is out of RT. So I said, look, let's use the CPCR Act and let us create guidelines for it, because CPCR Act has a very broad mandate. It just doesn't put things into narrow categories. And therefore we have created these guidelines for hostels. Wherever children are residing, there have to be guidelines, there have to be some awareness about how to treat with children, so that they don't live. I mean, the conditions in some of these education in hostels was really very sad. And therefore, that is something which we have done as a new initiative. And before I close, I would just like to reiterate that we have to think deeply about the safety of our children. We should not deprive them of a childhood. And unless a child has a happy childhood, how does the child develop? Some part of the brain gets, I would say, the scar remains in some part of the brain. And there have been studies to show that actually effects of childhood violence, corporal punishment to bahut hota hai. I'm not even touching on it, because CSA is a much more heinous crime. Child sexual abuse is a much more heinous crime, and done by, as Mr. Eric mentioned, bullying is there between children themselves. That leaves a very bad effect. Corporal punishment is there as a disciplining measure. Then even as I mentioned, the cases of Vadodara and Gurugram of older children bullying younger children to the extent of killing and knifing them. So this kind of thing is there, but we really, really need to spread this message. Protect your children. They are there. They have been given to us in trust. Every soul decides where it is to be born. No parent owns the child. This is something that we have to discuss. We spread this message that we protect our children, help them achieve their potential. It has been calculated in money terms that childhood violence, when it comes to future productivities, the countries lose by as much as 2 to 8% due to childhood violence. So think of it, when I was in disabilities, we used to get a lot of money, telling budgetary grant, telling the government, if you give us this benefit, such and such benefit. Our disabled people will improve the GDP by 1%. Here we are losing already, a lot of productivity by not being good to our children. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Since we are already 1 hour late for the next session, I think it will be grave injustice to the people who will be participating in that session to further prolong it. So I would eschew my remarks as President, Chairperson, and bring this meeting to an end so that the next session can start. Thank you.
I think that's the right thing to do. Okay, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having us.